All right. Hey, everybody. This is Liza Kirkpatrick. I am the Senior Director of Career Services for the Kellogg full-time program, and we are excited to join you today, have you all join us. The whole purpose of today is for you to have us to have a conversation with current students, second-year students, about their job search journey, how Kellogg helped prepare them, what opportunities came their way. What we know, just to our core, is that everybody's job search is unique. You're going to come to Kellogg with a unique set of experiences. We have all sorts of resources for you to tap in, but each one of you may tap into different resources along the way that will be super impactful. So we thought it would be best to bring you four great students of ours to tell you their stories. So we'll spend time going through their stories. We'll talk a little bit about the CMC and industries, and then we've got some questions that you all submitted at the end. So sound good? Are you guys ready?
We're ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to start with introductions. Let me get the slide because I think I'm supposed to do that. And I'm going to throw it to Phil to introduce himself and kind of go through his career journey here at Kellogg.
Great. So, hi, everybody. I'm Phil Cooney from Washington, D.C. I went to Georgetown for undergrad. I worked in consulting for a couple years and then decided to join the Marine Corps. So prior to Kellogg, I was an intelligence officer in the Marine Corps. And kind of hit that point in my career where I was deciding to make a pivot and knew that I didn't want to make the Marine Corps a career. And so business school was definitely on my horizon. And so what I really was looking for was kind of the ability to go to somewhere where I knew that I have a wide array of places that I could go, both geographically, but also by industry and function. So that's what initially attracted me to Kellogg. As I dug a little bit deeper, the community of Kellogg, particularly the Vets Club, as I was applying, was super helpful with not only kind of giving a sense of the day-to-day, but also helping with my own application. And so coming to Kellogg, I guess what I was looking to do afterwards, from the military, having such a kind of non-traditional background, I knew that something like consulting was going to be at least my first target industry, just to kind of get a broad spectrum of different industries. And so I went through the kind of consulting pipeline, and I'm sure that we'll get into kind of how that looks at Kellogg. But Kellogg has a super strong reputation and track record of sending folks into the consulting, and Vets also have a strong record of getting into consulting as well. Did my summer at McKinsey in Dallas, and had a great time there. Also during the summer, I had a little girl, our first child, and so that kind of changed a little bit of my perspective in calculus for my full-time. I was very glad to kind of have had that experience at McKinsey, and decided that we wanted to move a little bit closer to home. My wife's from San Antonio, and so USAA is a bank and insurer that has a large affiliation with the military, and so that's where I ended up kind of networking, not on campus, but using some Kellogg resources to help me land a job in the strategy group at USAA. So I think that about covers it. Yeah.
Tunraya, we're going to throw it over to you. You've got a very different story.
Yeah, very different. So I'm Tunraya. I'm from Nigeria, and I came straight to Kellogg from the continent. I had worked briefly in banking before moving to consulting, and after a couple of years in consulting, I realized that it was important to get some level of functional expertise. I felt I had a good understanding of different industries and some level of generalist knowledge. So I decided I wanted to do an MBA. I also needed the global exposure, and for me, it was really important that it was a place that I felt at home. I felt was a really good fit for me. So that was a major reason why I decided to come to Kellogg. And coming to Kellogg, I had a couple of things in mind that I felt I wanted to do full time. What was important to me was the company had a great culture. The company would definitely have a great culture, one that I would fit into, but also that I was in a role where I was building functional expertise for the long haul. So I was looking mostly at finance roles across different industries. I also considered some general management roles and just some internal corporate strategy roles in different firms. I also had a tilt towards tech because, I mean, that's where the good life is. So yeah, recruited for the summer and landed at Microsoft. Loved my internship there with the finance group, and I'll be going back there for the full-time role.
That's great. What about you, Phil? You are a one-year student. You're one of our one-Ys.
Yeah, so hello everyone. My name is Nikhil. So I have a very different story. I was born and raised in India. I came to the US in '06 to do my master's. So I graduated from Virginia Tech with a master's in engineering, and since then I worked in the telecom space. Started off as an engineer, then moved to managing a couple of global teams, spent 10 years in the telecom space and decided the learning curve had flattened, so wanted to pivot my career into a different field. While I was looking at the different MBA programs, I have a 2-year-old, so I wanted a program where the opportunity cost of an MBA was the lowest. And the 1-year program at Kellogg really appealed to me. It was very fast paced, but it was also, I could get in 1 year and out the next year with the MBA. So that's really what attracted me to the Kellogg MBA program. I graduate in June this year, and post my MBA, I'll be moving to Philly to join GlaxoSmithKline's Esprit program. So did check mark my goal of actually pivoting industries, and would love to talk a lot more about how Kellogg helped me in the journey.
Okay. Sahar, how about you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sahar. I'm from Vancouver, Canada, originally.
Sorry, keeping up.
No problem at all. And I actually went to school right outside of Toronto at a school called Queen's. And after that, I worked in the consumer healthcare space for a little while. So both at Reckitt Benckiser and Johnson & Johnson. Most recently, I was managing the Nicorette anti-smoking brand in the UK for the Nordic region, which was really interesting. But I realized that my passion was really in global health, and I was hoping to pivot from the more private sector space into something a little bit more impactful and personally meaningful. So I came to Kellogg for that reason, because of the very strong social impact program, which I'm happy to speak more about. And I ended up finding an internship in Nairobi, Kenya, and worked at a maternity clinic and nonprofit there in a business development role. And I think it was quite different than most MBA internships in the sense that I kind of created the role for myself, and like every day I had to redefine what I was working on. And certainly a very different experience than working in a big company like Johnson & Johnson. And pretty life-changing for me, because I ended up actually coming up with an idea for a social enterprise of my own, and have been working on it through the Zell Fellows program and some of the great entrepreneurship support that we have at Kellogg. So again, happy to get into that a lot more, but deciding what I'm going to do full-time based on some of this change that's happened recently.
Still thinking about it. Can you go into a little bit more detail about the Zell Fellows? Because I think that that's such a unique program.
Totally. Yeah, so the Zell Fellows program is specifically for student entrepreneurs, and there's 4 tracks. One of the tracks which I'm in is called Emerging Markets and Social Impact, that focuses on social entrepreneurs, and ones that focus on more developing markets. And then there's also the Healthcare, Consumer and Enterprise, and Acquisitions and Ownership track, all for entrepreneurs that are looking to get into this space in different ways. And it provides funding, mentorship, regular programming for a small group, like a select group of students in their second year.
Okay.
Or one-wise.
Or one-wise. Great. There were a couple themes that I heard come out in this conversation. One was around, and more to this side of the table, but I think it's to everybody, is around the Kellogg culture. How did that play out? You mentioned that that was a key factor in coming to Kellogg. How did that play out? And then the second point is around the career switch, the ability and thinking about career switching.
Yeah, so I was coming from a military community in San Diego, and it was a place where I spent a lot of time away from my wife. And so coming to Kellogg, I knew that I wanted to so the military community in and around base was pretty tight, and having support for my significant other there was super important to me. And so one of my criteria for looking at schools was how inclusive is the program for significant others. And Kellogg certainly stood out to me as tending to have like a higher percentage of people that were in relationships and had significant others. And so that is kind of weaved into all of the student life. It's from the beginning of Kellogg, when you go on kind of your quest trip with 20 new friends, you're kind of blind as to who's the student and who is the spouse. That was a great way for my wife to kind of be integrated in the community and not feel like she was an outsider. So that was a huge part for me, was making sure that my wife and family eventually were incorporated in the community.
And we call partners joint ventures. So
Right.
the nickname in Kellogg speak is JVs.
JVs, yeah.
So, and they're very much a critical part of our community. What about for you? Did culture, how did that play out? What were you looking for and what did you find?
So for me, it boiled down to the kind of people who like went to that school. And Kellogg was such that when I was doing my research about Kellogg and like talking to people about the school, what came out was the fact that it's very communal. It's different from what you would expect, like a typical business school persona to be, maybe like stuck up or very competitive. I mean, it's competitive because you have a lot of smart people here, but it's more like a group of people who are growing together, kind of like challenging each other.
Yeah.
And for me as an international, it was really important that I was in a place where it was diverse and very inclusive, just like what you said, where I could learn from other people and really just understand their different cultures and where they were coming from. But very importantly, where I would be shaped into the kind of business leader I really wanted to be. And Kellogg has this emphasis on very high impact and high ego. There was this article I read. I think that was the deciding factor for me. It said, if it was by a recruiter who explained that when you're sitting in a company meeting and you have people from different schools in that place, you could always tell who I wouldn't mention the other name, but like who a graduate from another school is from, based on how they interject or ask questions. But that the Kellogg person is that one person who sits in the room and doesn't talk too much, like isn't really loud, but when they do speak, change the direction, like really shape the conversation. And I felt, that's the kind of business leader I wanted to be. And yeah, that's why I'm here.
That's a great, we hear a lot about that on the recruiting side from employers who say the big difference for Kellogg students is that, working in a group and bringing out the best idea of everybody, kind of raising everybody up. Now, shifting to career switching, I'm looking at all of you, and all of you were career shifting in some way.
Yep.
And we know that like 75% of our incoming students are career shifters. How did that play out for you?
So for me, coming into Kellogg, I actually knew that I wanted to go to Philly because that's where my wife works and it was not going to be possible for us to relocate. So I knew where I wanted to go from a geography standpoint, but as far as industry coming in, I was open. So I kind of cast a wide net. And for me, what surprised me is the breadth of the alumni network, which is very important for a career switcher, especially. So so one thing is, across the board, all the alumni which I've talked with have been very helpful, basically one-on-ones, having coffee chats, sitting down with them, trying to understand about industry for a career switcher. I come from a non-pharma background, so really didn't know anything about pharma going in, but really having those chats over summer with all the alumni and really trying to understand what industry appeals to me played a very big role come fall when I started interviewing as to what I wanted to target.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a great question because I was kind of nervous about going back to business school, given that I was working in the private sector, looking to switch into something completely different that maybe doesn't necessarily require an MBA, but I felt like both the alumni network and the support services, not only from like a job posting or cover letter writing tactical perspective, but more from like a career coaching perspective, understanding what it is that you actually want from your career, how big of a company you want to work for, what kind of culture you're looking for, some of the intangible things that you don't always naturally think about yourself. I think some of those added resources that the CMC and kind of career services provided really help with that career switch. And I don't think I would have gone through that entire process. It was almost like a therapy type of thing had I not come to school. So I think I really benefited from that.
That's great. I mean, that's actually a great segue into kind of what are those support services services and what do they look like. So I'm going to take a little bit of a moment to give our audience an idea of what does a CMC provide, like how are we organized. And so the one side is employer relations, and I think about them as access to employers, and it could be via the Kellogg job board, it could be via on-campus recruiting, it could be a company hosting trucks. So that's kind of that creating a Kellogg talent marketplace. And then we have our coaching team who work with students one-on-one in those conversations that you mentioned, or through workshops. It can be very tactical, like honing the cover letter or resume or your pitch, or it could be very strategic in the what do you want to do next piece. So, we see all these playing together. We have an operations team too that is behind the scenes, but awesome. And then we also have this kind of X factor here, which I call which is the CMC library. And there are only 2 of our peer schools that have one. And this can help you prepare for interviews, informational interviews, and how do you get smart about a marketplace, or particularly when you want to career shift. So I know you use the library considerably, and I think people in the audience I don't really understand how this could be impactful. Can you shed a little light on that?
Sure. So the CMC library is where you go when you need resources for your job search. We have a number of full-time librarians who are there to provide help with giving you directions as to where you would find resources. So for me, it was important to get resources about the different industries I was looking at. I was going to be pivoting into finance, so I needed different resources for how do you prep for a role in finance or for interviews in finance. I also needed to really understand the tech industry. So it was useful attending some of their small workshops really about even getting articles, getting materials about industries, or getting to know where you would find alums or where you would find different types of jobs. So kind of sessions about, I found sessions about building your target list very useful. You would have a CMC librarian sit with you and say, what are you interested in? And then go through all of the companies that would recruit at Kellogg, all of the companies that would recruit just generally, but maybe it would be on the job board and elsewhere. And you'll be able to create your own target list even before recruiting starts. So sort of helping you build your recruiting strategy. They would also point you to what articles work best. So I made it a point to always show up at the CMC library whenever I had a question before interviews came up, and then an hour before my interview, just show up there and say, I have an interview with this company and it's for this role. What do you think I should be looking at that maybe I haven't seen in the other resources before? And it was really useful. I know it was definitely useful. I think we have a lot of resources in Kellogg, and that's one that is not usually spoken about a lot. But one that if you do use it, the benefits are.
Yep. It serves a couple different purposes. One, to get smart about an industry for career switchers. I mean, part of what you need to do is really learn the lingo and learn what's important in those industries. And then for interview prep, do you know enough about the company? Mm-hmm. So switching gears a little bit, I mean, here are the 3 areas of the CMC, the employer relations team, the coaching team, and then operations. And really, I think unique to Kellogg is that this employment community is not just the CMC. We're not the only ones helping students get jobs. It's this entire community that comes together. And, thinking about student clubs and what they bring to the table, and we work directly with the student clubs, but how does anybody have strong thoughts on kind of what the clubs bring to the table?
Yeah, I think the KVA, the Kellogg Veterans Association, has a unique relationship with CMC. Many clubs, so maybe it's not as unique, but many clubs have a CMC rep that basically works with that club to kind of tailor advice to people that are coming from a particular background. So for us, the Vets Club has Tina, who's an awesome advocate for us, both in the CMC, but also kind of a guiding hand. So one of the things that different affinity groups do at Kellogg before recruiting kicks off is kind of a networking break the ice event. And so the veterans have the Veterans Networking Night in early October, where we had 25 or so different recruiters come. And Tina was there kind of helping us make connections at each of these companies, keep ourselves organized, make sure that we were getting companies to come from different diverse backgrounds so that the veterans, the first year veterans had, different experiences and people to touch point with before recruiting even kicked off. That was helpful for a few reasons. I mean, I think primarily sometimes we could get pigeonholed into certain fields, like consulting comes to mind. And so it was great to kind of get out ahead of that and show incoming first years the breadth and depth of companies that come to Kellogg.
That's great.
Yeah.
Also unique to Kellogg, I think, is the interview prep groups, which we fondly call the IPGs, and they are student-led groups through the clubs where they help groups of second years help first years prepare for interviews. And so you're actually talking to somebody who may have interviewed with that same company the year before. And what I think is unique about this is it's kind of like all boats rise. You may be in the same group with somebody who has the same interview, but at Kellogg, the spirit is that we're getting everybody better. Mm-hmm. So any IPG examples, or were you guys in IPGs? Mm-hmm. I should know that before I ask the question.
Yeah. So for me, consulting, I was a part of the consulting IPG. Again, coming from a non-consulting background, didn't know what to expect. In a consulting interview, consulting interviews are different in that they're very much case-driven. So the IPGs were led by people who came from a consulting background. And to your point, Liza, really helpful people, students who are, who have been there, know exactly, what kind of questions to ask, really sitting down, taking time from their schedule to sit down one-on-one with you and really coach you through the process and areas of improvement. I found that to be very useful, especially again as an industry switcher. You don't know what to expect when you go for some of these interviews, and I personally found that to be very helpful.
Yeah. Anything on the alumni side? How responsive were alumni? And I know Phil and Nick, you did geographic specific searches in areas that are not heavy Kellogg alumni bases. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so first of all, I think there are a number of factors that helped me. So if I had tried to get a job at McKinsey by myself, it wouldn't have happened. The club, the IPG were a few, but we had significant alumni involvement. We're fortunate enough to have a lot of people go into the Chicago area, and we had a lot of alumni that come back and that actually do mock interviews with us before we go through the regular interview. So that was sort of one alumni touch point that definitely set me up for success in the summer recruiting. And then in my kind of off-campus tailored search down in South Texas, I was able to reach out to, so actually one of my final interviews at USAA was with one of their heads of strategy who's a Kellogg alum. Instead of grilling me, he basically used the 45 minutes that we had to prep me for the next couple interviews that I had, which is probably a unique experience, and the experiences may vary, but that was just sort of an interesting, another touch point. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
For me, my search was Philly-based, so what I found interesting again was, even though I was looking for jobs in Philly, I could first and foremost find a Kellogg alum in all the companies which I was targeting. Nice. And the next thing, I guess, to reiterate Phil's point, they basically invited me into the company. They introduced me to a bunch of people, managers of different departments, the recruiters. So really, the alumni network helped me get a foot in the door, essentially for all the companies which I was targeting. And even while I was actually prepping for the interviews, they were a phone call away, So it was really them going above and beyond. And Liza, to your point, I guess one of the things which I found interesting is in some of these areas where there might not be a lot of depth to the Kellogg alumni network, maybe it's just one or two people in the company who are Kellogg alums, I usually found those people to go above and beyond to help you out because they know that there are no other Kellogg alums to help you out, and they want you to come and work for that organization. So I usually found them taking an extra step to actually help me throughout the process.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I want to go to kind of specifics to the career coaching team. So we offer one-on-one coaching. There's also over 100 workshops that we do in the fall. I know our team has been down in the Plaza area taking, one-off questions all quarter. I wondered if you mentioned, Sahar, you mentioned coaching early on. I wonder if you could give people in the audience a little picture of what that looked like.
Sure, yeah. So I worked with a coach named Eva, and she is a supporter of the Net Impact Club, so specifically focused on small social impact related recruiting. And as I mentioned, everyone kind of has their idea of what they want to do when they come into Kellogg. I'm sure many of you have written applications that have a very specific story of what you're looking for. But then you get here, and there's so many more opportunities than you would really expect. So the coaching sessions were super helpful in laying out the various criteria that you might want to think about and thinking about anchors. So whether that's geography, whether that's lifestyle, whether that's size of company, sector, function, and then figuring out which of those criteria are the most important and what you hope to learn from that type of organization. So it really put a lot of structure and like a framework around thinking through some of this, which can end up becoming super overwhelming, especially in a non-traditional recruiting space where there isn't as clear of a path for not only how to seek out opportunities, but also how to apply for them and pursue them.
Yeah. Any other thoughts about working with a coach and how that played out?
I did use a coach very well, just as Sahar did. My coach was Ida. I found it really useful talking to Ida regularly, one-on-one. But starting from the beginning of my recruiting journey, where I had to decide on which firms to recruit for, and she was really helpful, helping me think through what would work for me and how I could make the transition I was trying to make. She was also really helpful introducing me to people. So she's been a coach to several students, so she knew who's worked in this company before coming to Kellogg and who's worked in this company and or is going back there full time amongst the second year. So she was really useful helping with those connections. She was also really useful helping me just get comfortable with myself in coming up with my interview responses. So preparing for my behavioral interviews, for instance, it was useful working with my IPG group on the technical part. But when it came to the behavioral part as an international, it was really important that I knew and owned my story and that I still stayed unique and true to myself when I was giving my responses. So I found it really good working one-on-one with a coach consistently, just working through those answers, getting her to tell me where to cut it off, where I was going too long, or where I wasn't selling myself well enough.
It's getting those additional inputs from somebody who is unbiased, and they're not. We literally have seen thousands of people do the job search, and so you can help normalize an experience, you can help draw out a story, you can ask questions. And so what I like about each of those is that it's a relationship over time. The more somebody gets to know you, the more pointed the feedback can be and actionable the feedback can be. And so that's really the goal. We do have students who come in and maybe meet with a coach once or twice and get it done and move on. But we do have other people who build those relationships over time. And so it really is kind of this opt-in thing. We have about 96% of the class does come in for coaching, so that reach into the class, people are valuing that experience. So shifting to kind of access to employers, one of the things that we know is that recruiting is changing, and that landscape of on-campus versus off-campus has changed. And so we're uniquely positioned to be able to look at employers, whether they're coming on campus or whether they want to do a virtual interview or whether they want to meet students through company tracks or post on the Kellogg job board. Our goal in the CMC, or even see students' resumes via the resume book, our goal is to really push, or create access, get our students in touch with employers. So that's how we focus on the employer side. And kind of moving on to one of the things, and each one of you has demonstrated this in your story, we look at it like there's 4 ingredients to a successful job search. One is being market smart, and particularly for the career switcher, understanding that market that you're going into is critically important. Self-awareness, and can develop over time, but with new experiences, but it's also something that you've got to be asking yourself a lot about. And asking for feedback and asking for critical feedback. Nimble strategy, it's having a plan B, a plan A, thinking what is the center of the bullseye, but also what are some other ways for you to get there, and then the hustle factor. So I wondered if two of you could talk about a little bit how you saw this play out on your search. Yeah. Anybody?
I could start. I mean, for sure, the self-awareness thing sticks out to me particularly. So I wrote, I'm sure a number of you all in the audience are writing or have written your essays, and I wrote my essay on, so what do I want to do post Kellogg was work in a strategy role in a company who had a mission that I could believe in. And once I got to Kellogg, there was this just dearth of like employers and opportunities out there, and maybe it was like the Marine in me that was like, find the structure, find what is laid out, and like execute. And so the consulting pathway for me was like, this is all laid out. So many people are doing it. It's tried and true. There's like zero risk. Let's just do it. And that worked. And then sort of in the summer and towards the end of the summer and talking with my coach, Megan Thomas, I could kind of work out like, come back into that like self-awareness that I had while I was applying. And say, is this really what I want to do long term? And so, she could help me really ask those tough questions, like, or I asked those questions to her, like, am I making a huge mistake by not taking this McKinsey offer and doing something else? And like you said, with sort of the development of relationships over time, Megan and our kids go to like the same daycare, so she gets it, and she was definitely a trusted advisor for me to help, just make the best decision for me in the long run. And so that's my self-awareness piece.
I think I love hearing that because it's not the industry that you go to, it's the path that whether that is the right one for you.
Right.
And that's what we try to draw out. It's in the Career Management Center, we are not, X number of people have to go to consulting and X number of people have to go to tech. That's not how we operate. It's really you getting the most out of the experience. Mm-hmm. Are you asking the right questions? Are you becoming self-aware? And then are you able to execute on that job search, the next step? So any thoughts on, did you have?
Yeah, so for me, it's, what I found really useful was to try and understand the trade-offs. So really, when coming into Kellogg, when I say trade-off, right, I was looking to switch industries. So you could look at your MBA as a platform to either switch your careers or accelerate in your current field.
Particularly in the one-year program.
Absolutely. You could be looking at the MBA to join a startup, which has a very different risk profile versus joining a larger corporation, which comes with its job stability. You could be looking at an MBA to get into a field which by nature has long work hours versus a good, healthy work-life balance. So for me, coming into the MBA program, I had a 2-year-old. I knew I didn't want to travel. I knew I didn't want to have working weekends. So that kind of took a couple of fields out from running as far as my job search goes. But then really being true to myself and sticking to that plan helped me keep some kind of discipline while selecting the opportunities I did go after. So really understanding those trade-offs, and to Phil's point, being true to yourself as to, do I see myself doing that long term? And I know when I used to meet with my career coach, she usually said this, that if you can't convince yourself that you will do well in that industry, why do you think a recruiter is going to not see through that, when he's actually talking with you? So right. I think that was something which, being self-aware, coming into the program, especially as a 1 year, which has an accelerated time frame, helped me a lot.
Yeah. So I want to get more into the kind of the breadth of possibilities around industries. And so as I mentioned earlier, there are larger numbers of students going into 4 top industries. 30% are going into consulting, 28% going into technology, financial services is around 14%, and consumer packaged goods 7%. And so there are people who are going on those tracks. You find a lot of similar job search processes, et cetera. And but what we know is that there's a breadth of possibilities here too, and so you can find your people no matter what. And when I think about entrepreneurship, usually in career management, it comes out in one of two ways. Either somebody comes in and says, I've got an idea or a problem I want to solve. I'm going to take advantage of Kellogg from an entrepreneurship lens. Or I'm not really sure if I have it, but I want to learn how to do it eventually. I may go work for a startup to see what that is like. And so those are really those entrepreneurship questions that come up early on. And you have such a unique story that way of how that's played out, and it's attached to that social impact piece. So I wonder if you could speak to the group about how that played out for you.
Sure, sounds good. Yeah, I feel like I hit almost all four of those buckets.
There you go, you do kind of.
So yeah, interestingly, I came from a healthcare background, was really passionate about moving into social impact specifically, and was less aware that I wanted to work for a smaller company. I came from like the almost fourth biggest company in the world,
right.
And through my coaching sessions was able to understand that I actually wanted that learning opportunity to work somewhere smaller and work somewhere where I could have more direct impact. And so I ended up working for a startup, which was the maternity clinic in Kenya over the summer, and that's where the spark for my idea came. And so I didn't come into Kellogg with an idea. I would highly recommend if you do have an idea, definitely take advantage of the resources that you can get in your first year. I feel like now with 1 year left or less than a year left, it is quite overwhelming with all that there is to do with the time we have left here. But I really started developing my own idea in my second year. So I would say Kellogg has a lot of support when it comes to looking for jobs in the non-traditional space, both in startups and in areas like social impact. But once you do develop your own idea, there's also a lot of support in that space. So, I benefited from a stipend over the summer to supplement my salary because I was kind of like at the trifecta of not being paid super well over the summer, but Kellogg was generous enough to give me some funding to support my salary and allow me to make that decision. And then now the Zell Fellows program does provide a bit of financial support in order for our entrepreneurs to test certain assumptions and risks during their school year in order to make it easier for us to take the leap once we graduate.
That's awesome. I know we were talking about earlier, 3 out of 4 students at Kellogg are involved in some social impact club. And so you really do have this community of mission-driven students who, even if they're not pursuing that as a career, are very interested in the topic and are very engaged. And healthcare, there's so much going on in healthcare now, and there's such different verticals. You can go into med devices, you can go into pharma, you can go into provider. Digital health is really coming up now, and the healthcare HEMA program is uniquely positioned to prepare students for a career in healthcare. So we wanted to give people in the audience a balanced perspective of what these different types of paths and offerings are. Doing a deep dive into how companies recruit, this is just a small sampling of who comes, some of the companies that come for consulting. And what we do see is that there are 2 different or many different channels that companies use. So for on-campus recruiting, there's 16 different companies that come for consulting, but then students are hired by 22 unique companies. So there are companies doing kind of that off-campus and unique process. So we want to give people kind of a balanced view of what that looks like. Top tech employers, this is where we've seen a tremendous amount of growth, not only in the startup space, but certainly with big tech as well. 65 unique companies hired class of 2018 grads, which is kind of crazy in a good way. 12 of those companies were on campus, but a lot were off campus, and they're doing virtual recruiting. So we're really becoming very nimble in how do we prepare students for that kind of next version of what recruiting looks like. Virtual interviews, how to connect, how to network with companies to uncover different opportunities. Library can be a key factor in that as well. So yes, we have the bigger tech companies, but we're also keenly aware that there are areas where there are emerging MBA needs that we will be, pursuing relationships with to connect students with. Financial services as well. There are 46 unique companies hiring, financial services companies hiring grads in the class of 2018. 19 of those are through OCR. So again, you're seeing that stratification of there's a lot that happens on campus, but then there's a lot that happens off campus too. Top CPG employers, 20 different companies hiring our grads, 17 of those through on-campus recruiting. So, this is to show everybody in the audience kind of the depth in those areas, but also that recruiting and what that process looks like. As students have unique needs, companies are developing unique recruiting processes as well, and they're using multiple channels to get in touch with talent. So, locations to fit your preferences too. We are in the Midwest. We've got, you're going to Seattle, you're going to San Antonio, you're going to Philly.
TBD.
TBD. Maybe we get lucky and get you to stay in the Midwest. And I think that you, both Phil and Nick, presented a really good story about if it's not the Geographic where you've got 30% of the class doing, how does that feel and what does that network look like? And you guys presented such a great story about the accessibility and almost if it's a smaller market, people are really excited to meet you, and to help you out.
Yeah, that was certainly my experience getting my foot in the door at USAA. They have a traditional MBA rotational program that they hire from. Kellogg is not one of their target schools. And having somebody come from Kellogg, I was kind of able to hustle was one of the other themes, like using either the Kellogg network or just vets who I could find on LinkedIn and kind of craft my own role and get my foot in the door at a different entry point than the traditional route into USAA. But I think having the Kellogg name kind of lends itself to that kind of credibility getting in front of the door. Yeah.
Regardless of the geographic location, that's amazing.
I should add that for internationals looking to go back home, we have some of these companies who recruit on campus, who also are very deliberate about recruiting for their home offices. So say for consulting companies, for instance, I know BCG, for an example, has a program where in Africa you could work here for a couple of years and then decide to go to the BCG office back in Africa. We also have different examples for companies coming from Asia. Just to recruit people from Asia who want to go back home.
Absolutely, that's a very real part of our process and part of us attracting employers who have a lot to offer our students. So I think we're moving on to the Q&A portion. So just bear with us one second. These are the questions that you all in the audience submitted. We have a number of different questions. And the first one is, and this gets to a little bit of what we were just talking about, I wonder how international students are prepping for employment. And when I saw this question, I thought there's the prepping for employment and then there's the prepping and thinking about recruiting. And so I think that there are kind of two different pieces of that. And so wondered if you could take a stab at the recruiting piece.
From an international perspective. I think that what works for most internationals is knowing what resources are available to you and making sure to use them. So I could speak for myself. I had to use the affinity groups a lot. You have a lot of internationals who are here and understand the challenges. You also have an alum network from your part of the world who would know exactly what challenges you might face and will be able to give you tailored advice as to what your recruiting strategy should be. Good thing is Kellogg has a diversity of companies who would sponsor you if you wanted to stay back in the US or would recruit you for your home office or their home office or something like that. But in terms of preparation, pretty much the same resources that anybody else within Kellogg would have. But in addition, we have some specific workshops for internationals just to get you comfortable with recruiting within the US. So say, for instance, small talk and networking was big deal for many of us when we first got here, but we had multiple sessions. I mean, you get jaded just hearing about how to do small talk or how to network, whether in recruiting sessions or to network just by reaching out to people to get jobs, or a lot of interview prep as well. Kind of like coming up with your responses, having your unique story told, but making sure that you get exactly what you want out of your Kellogg experience, regardless of where you're coming from.
So you're looking at it more as access to using resources. There are a lot of resources here, and then you consuming those resources and asking questions. I mean, because a lot of our international students have never recruited in the U.S., and this mysterious networking thing that comes out, getting familiar with that very in the beginning and learning what that is. And we really look to create opportunities to practice too, because we know that interviewing is a learned skill, and networking, the more you do it, the better you get at it, and the less hesitation you have about that. We also have a peer coaching program that the CMC runs, and this is second years who are assigned first years who opt in, international first years. And so it's a way, we really felt like our international students need a way to expand their network right at the very beginning, and to look at and kind of have recruiting and kind of the Kellogg experience demystified by a fellow student early in the fall. And so that has been, you participated in that.
Yes, I did. And I'm currently actually a peer coach. What it means is a group of us second years from different places would be in a group and like mentor some of the first years through everything related to Kellogg. And this is going beyond recruiting, but with a lot of focus on recruiting, because that's what most people would sweat about. But this includes like helping them fit into the Kellogg environment, asking whatever questions they have, staying in touch with them, understanding when they're struggling or when things are getting a bit overwhelming, which is something that's real and that does happen, but also keeping them on track as to what needs to be done, helping them think through and talk through their recruiting strategy and the recruiting timeline as well. Like, oh, this is when you need to have your pitch ready, when you need to have your cover letter and your resume ready, and also helping with reviews and interview prep, just like you said.
Yeah, it's been a great program, and we see a lot of value on both sides. I think the people who are peer coaches themselves get a tremendous amount out of it as well. On the employment side, we run success series in the spring to help students get ready for their internship or full-time work as well. And I think it's also the student and working with a coach saying, there's a way to build excitement for your candidacy where you're talking to your potential employer. What should you be reading? What advice do they have for when you start? Is there any type of insight on the project you may be working on so that you could connect with a professor while you're here to get some insights about it? So we try to get you thinking about how do you onboard your internship or full-time job as strongly as possible. So moving on to the next question here. How do you recommend 1Y students best prepare for fall recruitment in the summer? I think that's directed to Nick.
So the 1Y program is unique. It is very fast-paced. We basically come in summer, take some core classes, and starting fall, we are taking the same electives which the 2-year students are taking. From a recruitment standpoint, I would say the accelerated timeline comes with some kind of discipline which you need to put on yourself. Right. But I think as a 1Y, at least for me, I was uniquely positioned during summer to leverage a lot of CMC resources. So in summer, there's no one on campus. Typically all the 2-year students are out, doing their internships. You still have the CMC staff up and running during summer. So for me, it was really getting a lot of face time with my coach. So I basically had weekly meetings set with my coach, and it didn't matter whether I was prepared or not prepared. One thing which I knew I was going to do is go and actually sit down with my coach, and that kind of instilled some kind of discipline as far as the coming up with the deliverables. I remember I started the program last June, and 1 month into the program, my coach was asking, "Where's your draft resume?" 2 months into the program, I was networking with all these different companies. Yeah. So I think OneWise are uniquely positioned to leverage that summer to the fullest, where you can get a lot of help on campus, with your recruiting, coming up with the job search strategy, coming up with all the deliverables, so that once that August or September hits, you're very well positioned to actually go and start interviewing. And I think more and more recruiters now know about the one-year program, so they kind of understand the structure of the program. Right. So I think leveraging that summer to the fullest was very helpful for me.
I think that you brought up a good point, is leveraging the team that is here in the summer that certainly can work with OneWise a lot, yeah. But then it's also the discretionary time that you put in to do yeah. the prep work yourself, to keep yourself on a schedule. Yeah. Because what you don't have as a OneWise is the peer set that's interviewing at the same time as you are. Yeah. And so while it's a little bit quiet and provides access to resources, you've got to create your own momentum going in, and that's kind of that discretionary time that you put towards interview prep. Yeah. Because as soon as fall quarter starts, it's right yeah. there, ready.
And I mean, just to add to that, one of the things which we as a section did for our 1Y class was we started with the IPGs even yeah. in summer. So it was yes. not a formal IPG which a Kellogg club was starting. It's just, people knew what they were targeting come fall. So given that summer, we were like this small section in the college, we basically knew who else is doing what, and we started these informal IPG sessions on our own. So that helped as well.
That's amazing. That's great. Okay, so we covered that one. What are the resources that are offered by CMC Post-MBA, and how easy is it to access the resources? I think that is for me, because you guys aren't there yet, so, and won't be for a while. Kellogg is a school that deeply believes in career development and career support. And to that end, we have an alumni coaching team that is run by Matthew Temple. And these are coaches that all of our alumni can access at any time. It is free to use. They cover questions like, I want to get a promotion at my current company, or I'm looking to switch companies, or I've got a difficult boss. How should I think about this? So it's not only the acquisition of a new job, but it may be some other career development things. I've taken time off and I want to re-enter the marketplace. They cover a lot of different things, and they're very connected to our office as well. So I think that this is, signals how deeply Kellogg is committed to long-term career development. And it will be a long time before you access that, but know that it's there and available to you.
I think one plug is that you also have access to some of the CMCA library materials.
Yes, you do. Thank you. Yes, you do. So you do. There's a whole website. It's got, I think that I'm not going to quote the number, but there are a large number of videos. They've got content on the website that you can access at any time, and then the live body that you can, the live coach that you can talk to as well. So next question, and I think we're kind of coming to almost to the end. We've got one more. How has the CMC adapted over time to meet the changing demands of recruiters? We talked a little bit about this, and you saw the difference between how many companies are hiring in the industry versus who's coming on campus. We know that 80% of our jobs and internships are school facilitated in some way. It may not be just on-campus recruiting. It may be through a faculty referral, it may be through a track activity, it may be through an alumni, it may be through the Kellogg Job Board. So we see that we want to connect employers to our students in any way, regardless of the channel. And so that's really how we're thinking about it. Some of our tech partners have really pushed the envelope on being creative in this space, and our philosophy is if they want to interview more Kellogg students, we're going to find a way for them to be able to do that. So that's how we think about it, and I'm sure that there's more changes going forward. What we also want to do is arm our students with a job set a job search toolkit that you'll be able to use the rest of your career. And so regardless of whether it's a on campus, which is not going to exist as you move on, but that you have the elements, you know how to network, you know how to frame your story, you know how to tell your story, you know how to do those 4 elements, get market smart, have a nimble strategy, hustle, and be self-aware. And those things are going to serve you no matter what. So regardless of the recruiting channel, how a company is recruiting, we want you to be able to access that marketplace. And so those are the internal skills. Last question, how does the CMC partner with different career clubs like the marketing clubs to help students land in certain areas? We do a tremendous amount. Each one of our professional clubs has a CMC liaison, and so we're constantly talking to them about not only what employers are they interested in, but also like what does their career development programming look like. Phil mentioned the Vets Club. We do a lot with K-Tech as well. Social impact, I mean, we're very tight with that group too. It's really, truly a partnership. So it's not that our clubs are standalone, we work together. A lot of examples of how the CMC actually, when an employer comes to us, they ask, well, how can I market my job board opportunity with students? And we direct them to the student clubs for inclusion in the newsletters. So just a tremendous amount in that area. Anybody have any thoughts on that club?
Yeah, I would just echo everything that you said. I think it's really important to have them working together because in spaces like non-traditional careers, there are opportunities that we're not always seeing. So while we can reach the students, you all have access to the recruiters and just like the plethora of opportunities and job boards available. So even things like purchasing memberships for job boards or newsletters that we wouldn't necessarily be able to afford ourselves, like doing that at scale has been really helpful.
Absolutely, and we're now using an instant communication tool called Slack, and so we're having ongoing conversations about how do we even have more of a presence with student clubs about kind of the real time. Somebody calls the CMC and wants to post a job. How can we get students' eyes on that, like in the next, minute?
I should also add that beyond just getting a job, the clubs are very useful preparing you for your internship or for your full-time role. So like having workshops or training sessions where you're learning specifically about what you'll be doing full-time or during your internship, just making every effort to set you up for success.
Absolutely. So I hope our audience got an idea of how Kellogg helps prepare you for a career switch, a career acceleration, and had an opportunity to kind of understand our students' stories. And this is just 4 examples of every unique story that is out there. So I just want to thank Phil and Tunraya and Nick and Sahar,
yeah.
Sorry.
No problem.
For joining me today. Really enjoyed having you here, and I know our audience did too. So thank you all for tuning in. If you want additional information, you've got the website on your screen, and please do follow up with us. Thank you.
Thank you.